In the U.S., EV inventories are up 300% from a year ago. There's very poor demand for EV pickup trucks. The guys who have pickup trucks don't seem to be too interested. Ford Motor has announced that they're losing between 40 and 60,000 on each EV sold. They're projecting a $4.5 billion loss this year from their EV business. Both Ford and GM have moved out their new models. And I think we have an early adopter phase that is over.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Hey, so the green economy, it's wonderful. We'll just all be living in this pristine environment. The earth will be restored to its former grandeur, and everyone will be happy, right? Well, not so fast. Yes, environment, very important. We all believe in the same things: clean water, clean air, and a good environment to raise your children and your family in. It's just a question of how bad are things? What do you need to do to get there? Steve Goreham, author of Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. Your title might be a little bit late on the score, Steve. We're thrilled to have you on the show. Hey, so how bad are things? Are things really getting worse? Or are they getting better in the environment?
Gary, great to join you. Yeah, they're actually getting better. And my prediction of a green breakdown refers to net zero. And actually, I'm projecting out about a decade, but it appears that is closer. We have a lot of things going on around the world that show that people are stepping back from net zero. But you're right, pollution is, we've made great strides. One of the great untold stories in the United States is how much better the air is than it was 30, 40 years ago. I remember in the 1960s driving near Chicago, south of Gary, and having our windshield coated with something coming from the steel mills. We had to pull over and wash the windshield off. My grandfather had a coal furnace in his basement in the 1950s. And after it snowed in Chicago for about 4 or 5 days, there would be black dust on all of the snow you could see from the coal. And young folks that listen don't know what spring cleaning was for. Literally in the 1950s, people would every spring wash down all the walls on the inside of their house to remove the coal dust that was spring cleaning. But we don't have to do that anymore. Our air is very, very much cleaner.
Yeah, that is a fact. And I remember driving into New York City from New Jersey, where I grew up, and seeing this huge yellow cloud hovering over Manhattan. And that was all the coal-fired power plants. But look, without the government pushing businesses, industry, do you think things would have improved anyway?
I think there's a combination. The government helped, and we had many states. In 1950, there were no statewide laws for pollution, but by 1960, they just about all had them. And then the Clean Air Act came in, I think, 69 or so. But the problem is the world has gotten off track. Where we used to reduce real pollution, and we've done a great job. EPA numbers show our air pollutants, the 6 major pollutants, are down about 80% since 1980, probably much, much more since the 50s. What comes out of the tailpipe of your car, the volatile organic compounds, are down 98% since 1970. But now we're chasing this idea that carbon dioxide is a pollutant. We've really gotten off track. Carbon dioxide is an odorless, harmless, invisible gas. It doesn't cause smoke or smog. We burn sugars in our body, and every day we exhale about 2 pounds of carbon dioxide each person, and it makes the plants grow. It's, I like to ask when I'm speaking to audiences, what do cannabis growers know that the EPA apparently doesn't know? And the answer is that CO2 is green. Every marijuana grower with his or her salt is literally pumping carbon dioxide into their greenhouse to make their crops grow bigger and faster.
Oh, we've got to stop them. They got to be stopped here.
We've got off track. We need to continue to reduce real pollution, but this war on carbon dioxide and this plan for net zero by 2050 really is not the proper way to go.
All right. So what is happening in the marketplace besides Tesla? there isn't an auto company on the planet that can make money on EVs. Maybe a couple of Chinese ones, but they're using slave labor and forced labor and all that.
Maybe BYD. Yeah, the electric vehicle market has hit a speed bump, if you will. In the U.S., EV inventories are up 300% from a year ago. There's very poor demand for EV pickup trucks. The guys who have pickup trucks don't seem to be too interested. Ford Motor has announced that they're losing between 40 and 60,000 on each EV sold. They're projecting a $4.5 billion loss this year from their EV business. Both Ford and GM have moved out their new models. And I think we have an early adopter phase that is over. Many of the folks that wanted cool Teslas and wanted EVs for a second car have purchased them. Now we have people that are driving long distances, or they're in cold climates when the batteries don't charge well, or they're in apartments and there's no way to charge your EV except across the public walkway. So, it's just slowing down a little bit.
All right. I'm going to propose a reason for this to you.
Okay.
And you're free to agree or disagree. In the case of the Tesla, all right, their demand really isn't slowing down. They're going to sell 1.8 million cars this year.
Yeah.
In their case, the driving experience and the product that they produce is superior to all of the ICE vehicles out there, with certain exceptions, like if you live in a condo or an apartment, charging can wind up costing you more than gasoline. But if you live in a home and you can charge it yourself, it's great.
Yeah.
And I would aver that GM and Ford's products, and even Porsche and Audi, their products are inferior to the ICE cars that are being produced by themselves. And that is why the market's not catching on to their products.
Yeah, I think what you say is true. Tesla really has done a great job. There's just kind of a mounting series of things that make it difficult for some owners. Another one is insurance. I think in the U.S., the price of insurance for an EV is about up 72% versus a gasoline car.
I had an accident. I had an accident in my Tesla. It was gone a month and a half, and a simple accident that really, on a regular car, would be maybe $6,000-7,000. It was $20,000.
Oh my gosh!
Totally.
Yeah, in England now there are a lot of. It's hard to get insurance in England for an EV. There's a lot of articles. People are calling around all over, and the price is about £5,000 for a year for an EV insurance. So there are just no shades. And again, I'm not against EVs. I think we have people that have a choice. But this idea that the federal government is going to force everybody to buy one, or the state of California, and we're going to stop the oceans from rising if we do that, that's where we've really gotten off base.
Hey, I've said this so many times, there's never been an energy transition that was mandated and facilitated by the government. The market always did it. Before we had any vehicles, some guy came along and invented the wheel. Or he discovered that you could put a saddle on a horse. The government wasn't there saying, you need to stop walking and start riding. Yeah. And then, we had brown energy from horses for a few hundred years, maybe 1,000 years. And then we had the internal combustion engine come about. And the government was not there saying, hey, give us your horses and we'll give you a free car. Yeah. The market figured this stuff out. Yeah. And that's why this is such a fool's errand, Steve, in my opinion, is the market wants a new power transition. The market will dictate it. The market will mandate it. It'll demand it. And anyone who doesn't comply will go out of business, right?
They will. And we have some serious issues coming about. If we could switch to wind and solar for a moment. Most of many states, not most of the Midwest or the South, but the East and West Coast are trying to switch to wind and solar and use as much wind and solar and get rid of coal, natural gas, and even nuclear. And we have some serious problems develop. Now listen to this quote from Mark Christie. He's a federal energy regulatory commissioner. He testified in June in front
of... I know something. He might know something.
He said, I think we're headed for very dire consequences, potentially catastrophic consequences in the United States in terms of the reliability of our grid. And he went on to say that we're closing the things that are keeping the lights on too fast. And indeed, if you look at data from the U.S. Energy Department, they track outages for electricity users.
Mm-hmm.
And back in 2013, 2014, the average hours of outage was about 3.5 per year. Now it's up to about 7 or 8 per year in the United States, and it's going to go much, much higher. And we've had big problems in Texas and Oklahoma and California. Yes. We had the blackout in February 2021. Power was off for 72 hours to 4.5 million people, and we had somewhere between 250 and 700 people die. That's bigger than a big hurricane. And this Texas is doing better. They didn't have blackouts this summer, but they actually issued 10 electricity shortage warnings.
Yes.
Saying, don't plug in your electric car, don't run your air conditioner. That was it.
Don't put the coffee maker on.
So we have some real problems coming, and I'm afraid people are going to have to learn the hard way on this. And so we're going to have, this is part of the coming green breakdown, we're going to have people going back to sensible, reliable, low-cost energy.
Steve, this is an absolute unmitigated disaster that's coming down the pike. Look, I do believe that microgrids really have an application because it will stabilize grids and enable that the alternative energy to be stored and used when needed. I mean, it's definitely a major, major advance. I think a lot of it's being pushed now by tax credits, but there's no question the microgrid stabilizes unstable grids when you have enough of them, and might even eliminate the need for peaker plants, plants that come on during peak periods of demand. But you absolutely cannot base the future of your grid on this.
Yeah, I think you're talking about grid scale batteries, which are being put in a number of places.
Yeah.
And those do back up wind and solar. There's a couple problems. One is that so far it's very, very small. Again, I talk to audiences about this and ask them a question. How much of our electricity is stored by batteries in the U.S.?
No, it's nothing.
And the answer turns out it's 2 watt hours in every million watt hours. I mean, it's basically insignificant at this point. And even if you double, triple, quadruple it, it's going to be almost not useful. It would have to be a very, very big amount. The other things is batteries tend to be expensive. A good rule of thumb is if you want to back up a wind system for a day with batteries, you need to spend about 5 times as much on batteries as the wind system itself. And then the batteries die they have half the lifetime of the wind. They die in 10 or 12 years. So right now you're talking about 10 times the cost of the wind system itself to back up for a day. Now batteries are going to come down in price and they may get better, but we're still a long, long way away from that solution.
That's a given. And there's enough incentives in the market. The government doesn't need to be giving away truckloads of money here. What about the way they're subsidizing the purchase, $7,500 towards an EV? And these are wealthier people, more well-off people who can afford the vehicle without the subsidy. It's just giving money away, getting absolutely nothing in return for it.
Yeah, it's a wealth transfer to the rich, really. And the amount of money is huge. Back in the Biden administration, in the Obama administration, about 2015, we were subsidizing wind and solar and other renewables about $15 billion a year. That went down to about $8 billion a year under Trump. But now with the Inflation Reduction Act and President Biden is going up to $40-50 billion a year. It's just huge. And we had crazy things going on. There's a war going on in Iowa, South Dakota, and North Dakota right now over carbon dioxide pipelines. They want to capture these from ethanol plants, put them through pipelines to North Dakota, store the carbon dioxide underground. And so the farmers are battling these pipeline companies, but nobody would be doing this without the subsidy. If the subsidy wasn't there, nobody would do it. It doesn't make any sense. We have plenty of carbon dioxide for soft drinks and beer. We don't need to be capturing it. It's all based on the fear of man-made warming and these huge subsidies.
Hey, wait, I heard we have a shortage of carbon dioxide. Is that true?
Well, it depends on the way you look at it. Yeah, actually, we have about 400 parts per billion in the atmosphere right now. About 4 of every 10,000 molecules in the atmosphere is pretty small. But many scientists point out that it was much, much higher in Earth's distant past. 3,000 or 4,000 parts per billion, 8 or 10 times as much. And by the way, those happened during ice ages, which is evidence that having high levels of carbon dioxide doesn't cause a lot of warming. So it is low compared to past situations, but it has risen about 30% since the 1950s.
Right. Okay. So what's it going to take for these policymakers to come to their senses, or do we just forget it?
Well, we're going to have 4 things happen with a green breakdown. First, we're going to have higher energy prices, especially electricity. California in the last 3 years has passed up all the New England states and is now second highest in the nation behind Hawaii, twice as high as any other Western state for electricity. We're going to have electricity blackouts, which we've talked about. We're going to have less freedom because they're trying to ban gasoline vehicles and gas stoves. And we're going to have transnational energy shocks like they've had in Europe over the last 2 years, where the price of electricity more than tripled and the price of natural gas went up 2.5 times. And they are really hurting over there. In England, they don't want to turn on their ovens and they don't want to turn on their furnaces. The prices are just way too high. So this is what is going to come from green energy, these 4 things. And people are going to push back. It's going to break down, and we're going to demand a return to low-cost, reliable energy.
Hey, they keep talking about sustainability. To my way of thinking, Steve, the most sustainable form of energy ever found was petroleum.
Well, it is. There is real pollution we still need to reduce. Don't get me wrong. For example, 80% of the world's wastewater is discharged in rivers, lakes, and streams untreated. Not in the U.S., not in Europe. But if you remember about 7 years ago, the swimmers in the Olympics down in Brazil didn't want to swim in the water. Another issue, and Brazil was just building their first water treatment plants. Another one is plastic in the oceans, which is an overstated thing somewhat. We have about 100 million tons of plastic in the oceans. We're adding about 10 million a year. We need biodegradable plastics. Those are real problems to solve. Well, it tends to be more expensive. They've got some of it, but it's more expensive. By the way, banning straws in Los Angeles isn't really going to do anything.
It's not going to save whales.
So these are real problems we need to solve. But let's quit this attack on carbon dioxide. By the way, another thing is there's still 700 million people across the world that don't have electricity. There are hundreds of hospitals that are trying to run without electricity hookup. 2 billion people, an additional 2 billion, get blackouts every day. So these people need low-cost electricity. That's another big problem to solve. Let's quit trying to get rid of CO2.
Yeah, and I like soda, man. If we get rid of CO2, I'm going to have to drink a flat soda. That doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah.
It seems totally wrong. Steve, hey, where do we find you? How do we connect with you? How do we get your book?
Yeah, Green Breakdown. So it's available on Amazon. There are also ebooks on Apple and Google and Barnes & Noble. Or they can go to my website, Steve Goreham, GOREHAM.com, and I'll send them a signed copy.
Excellent. All right. Appreciate that. If you've got a question for Steve, myself, email address kl@kerrylutz.com. And the link to Steve's site is in the show notes of this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Click it, it'll take you right to it. You can get his books, all of that good stuff. While you're at the site, please sign up for your free newsletter. Steve, we'll talk to you again. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.